The story began in a noisy classroom, where a smiling boy with bangs was talking at the front. Meanwhile, the protagonist remained in the back, sitting alone and drawing. In his notebook, it could be seen that he was designing a piece of furniture accompanied by technical notes, and even so, he showed a faint smile as he stayed focused. In his mind, specific details of the design also took shape. He imagined a Dutch style made with paulownia wood and meticulous decorative work on the surface. However, that calm was broken when, near him, two classmates raised their voices over a throw, since they were boasting and arguing at the same time. Suddenly, something struck the back of his head hard, accompanied by a sharp, dry sound. When he turned around, he saw two boys holding a mop and a stick, still surprised, and then he realized that what had hit him was a cleaning cloth. One of them apologized and took the blame lightly, as if nothing significant had happened. Even so, the confusion grew when that boy called him by the wrong name. Consequently, another classmate corrected the pronunciation to make it clear that he was Kutsuzawa Kusei. After that, the smiling boy repeated his correctly stated surname and commented casually that it was the first time he had heard his voice. Right after, he shifted his attention to the protagonist's notebook, assuming that he might be hiding something. He also mentioned that he watched popular shows too. However, the conversation was interrupted when two girls, while flipping through a magazine, reacted with surprise to a photo and spoke excitedly upon discovering that one of them appeared next to a very famous model. The blonde girl pointed at the image enthusiastically. At the same time, another girl looked impressed, and the one with short hair commented on how incredible it was that an amateur model could appear next to professional models. Then, the blonde girl, slightly blushing, explained that that day they had worked at the same place. While the girls kept talking, the protagonist tried to resume the dialogue with the boy from before and asked him whether he was actually listening. However, since he got no answer, Kusei asked again, still holding the cloth, what he was supposed to do with it. Even so, the smiling boy walked away without paying attention to him and headed toward the girls, raising his voice as if wanting to listen in as well. In this way, the protagonist remained behind, alone again, looking down, dejected, until he decided to get up with the intention of washing his face. Nonetheless, without him realizing it, the blonde girl watched him with a serious expression. Then, in the boys' bathroom, the protagonist saw himself in the mirror, discouraged, with drops of water on his face, thinking that that had been his chance to speak. At the same time, he remembered that a few months had already passed since he had entered high school. In his memory, the groups that talked among themselves had more or less already formed. Therefore, since he had missed his chances to join any of them, he had ended up completely isolated, sitting alone while everyone else already had their group. In front of the mirror, he described himself as what they called a solitary introvert. He even felt that he would like to be able to talk to anyone the way that boy had just done. However, he understood that that kind of behavior must come from the confidence of those who stood at the top of the school's social status. Thus, Kusei imagined that if he tried talking to such a popular group, everything would end badly, and he pictured himself approaching them and interrupting their conversation. That negative imagination continued with exaggerated scenes in which the situation became humiliating and dramatic for him, absurd punishments born from his insecurity that piled up to the extreme. Finally, the fantasy ended, and he returned to the present. Now sitting in the bathroom, he kept thinking that the problem wasn't only with popular groups, but also with his doubt about whether he could make friends at all. Because of that, he tried to remember how he used to do it before. In the silence of the empty bathroom, he reached the conclusion that everything would be different if he had some hobby in common with the others. Although at the same time, he acknowledged that people who could get excited about the same things as others already possessed a kind of talent, at least from his perspective. When he left the bathroom, still holding the cloth, a voice called out to him by his surname. He turned around, surprised, and saw a slender girl. She introduced herself as Yoko Kira, and also apologized for speaking to him so suddenly. Then, with a big smile on her face, she told him she wanted to ask him something after classes. Therefore, that declaration left Kusei very confused. Later, in an empty hallway, the clock marked the hour. There, a small wooden cabinet was now finished, and Kusei had just set it in place. Yokokiro was impressed when she saw it and commented that he had fixed it in an instant. However, Kusei downplayed it and explained that he had only re-nailed the board that was broken. Even so, Yokokiro insisted that he had done it really fast. After that, outside, in front of a workshop, Kusei explained that his family owned a workshop where they made furniture and that he had learned by helping them. Yokokiro reacted as if she understood and added that during the break, she had taken a quick look at his notebook. That was why she had assumed he was good at those things, and, according to her, she had been right. Then Kusei clarified that he helped with the family business, although he also designed things as a hobby. Yokokiro praised him, saying he already seemed like an artisan. However, Kusei responded that he still had a long way to go. At that moment, Yokokiro explained that the cabinet was club property, and that, since they had a limited budget, the repair was extremely helpful for them. Kusei was glad that it would serve them well. Suddenly, another girl appeared to call Yokokiro and ask her to go to the club. Yokokiro hurried, and with repeated apologies, prepared to leave. However, before going, she sincerely thanked Kusei and invited him to visit the club someday. Kusei said goodbye with a faint smile, and once he was alone again, he found himself wondering what club it might be. As he continued walking, Kusei thought that Yokokiro was a good person. Likewise, he realized that although at first he had believed she might be someone similar to him, in reality she had great ease for talking, and that difference made him feel a certain distance. Even so, he preferred to see the positive side. Since that day he had spoken with 2 people from his class. In his mind then appeared the image of Madamada Castle as a clear comparison. It was known as the castle built in a single night. However, in reality it had taken several days to construct, and that idea helped him accept that friendship did not develop overnight. With that, Kusei understood that there was no need to rush and that sooner or later, he would find someone he could connect with. Kusei kept walking alone along the street when, suddenly, the blonde girl rode past on her bicycle, laughing and humming a tune carefreely. He looked up at the sky and noticed a cloud that reminded him of the Toyotomi family crest. From that thought came the desire to be as good at winning people over as Hideyoshi had been. Then he heard a noise and realized that a bicycle was losing control. Alarmed, Kusei turned around to see that the bicycle was heading straight toward him at high speed. The impact seemed inevitable. However, in an unexpected twist, Kusei stopped the bicycle with his body, preventing a tragedy. The girl, surprised and sweating, realized that she had braced herself for pain, yet it hadn't hurt as much as she imagined. However, when she looked up, she understood that she had been saved by a boy from her same class, which startled her even more. Kusei, on the other hand, was also sweating, but with an expression of pain. Inside, he acknowledged that the blow had struck him in the abdomen. She worried about his condition, and Kusei managed to say that he was fine, although his body seemed to say otherwise. The girl was grateful and made it clear that Kusei had saved her. Additionally, with a smile, she commented that she hadn't known he was so fast, called him by his surname, and asked him if he really was okay. Kusei, still kneeling, watched her closely and tried to place her. He thought she was part of the Jaru group in his class and searched his memory for her name. However, he ended up saying someone else's name, confusing her, which left her bewildered. Then she clearly introduced herself as Mizuguchi Seika and, at the same time, pulled his arm to help him stand up. She also explained that Deguchi was her friend. Kusei apologized, and his expression showed the panic of having mistaken the name of someone who stood at the top of the class's social status. After that, Seika leaned toward him to ask what his name was. At that point, Kusei's mind drifted into an exaggerated dramatization, as if he were bidding farewell to his parents before departing. Because of this, Seika reacted with confusion at his behavior. Kusei grew nervous. A short laugh slipped out of him. And then the situation shifted when Seika made it clear that she wasn't angry, and that, for some reason, she found Kusei funny. Then Seika insisted that she had already introduced herself and wanted Kusei to tell her his name as well. Kusei understood that leaving without saying anything would be strange, therefore, he finally introduced himself as Kutsuzawa Kusei. Seika repeated his name, although she paused for a moment on the pronunciation. At that moment, the protagonist began to say nonsense, since he didn't know how to start a conversation. Seika fell silent with a shadowy expression, and Kusei noticed her reaction. That pause, in turn, triggered another negative fantasy in his mind. Even though they were classmates, he thought that perhaps Seika didn't want to associate with an introverted person like him. In the worst-case scenario, he imagined a scene where popular girls confronted him for approaching Seika, accusing him of getting pushy just because he had helped her a little. With that idea, Kusei concluded that the best thing would be to leave quickly and accept that they probably wouldn't interact again. So he tried to say goodbye and walk away. But Seika stopped him on the spot and asked him to wait. She then tried to move forward on her bicycle. However, something sounded off, and Kusei realized that the chain had come off. Immediately, he asked her if she wanted him to fix the bicycle, which left Seika astonished, since she couldn't believe it. Seika apologized again for the trouble, but Kusei dismissed it, assuring her that he could fix it right away. At the same time, he thought that if Seika apologized like that, perhaps she wasn't as bad a person as he had assumed. While working on the chain, Kusei remembered hearing that she was a magazine model. Therefore, he understood that if it hadn't been for something like this, he would never have had contact with someone like her. When he finished, he confirmed that the chain was back in place. Seika was impressed to see it already done and reacted enthusiastically, calling him a god. Then Seika smiled as she recorded him with her phone. She wanted to upload that feed to Twitter, and Kusei was shocked when he realized she had filmed him without permission. Inside, he felt strongly that he didn't want that posted online and tried to refuse. However, Seika clarified that his face wasn't visible, so it was fine. In the end, Kusei ended up agreeing, completely defeated. While the narration emphasized that he was an introvert incapable of resisting pressure from extroverted people, Seika continued smiling with her phone in hand and tried to reassure him. She said that only her friends would see it because her account was private, and afterward, she even admitted that what she had done had been wrong. Even so, Seika laughed naturally, as if everything could be solved with that lightheartedness. Kusei kept turning over in his mind the phrase she had said, and finally, he thought that as long as his face wasn't visible, it would be fine. Then, Kusei said goodbye with the intention of leaving. He also mentioned that the chain was old and that she might want to replace it. Seika accepted without arguing. As he let out a sigh, Kusei admitted to himself that he never understood what extroverted people were thinking, and since he was tired, he preferred to go home quickly to rest. Kusei began walking, but Seika followed him while pushing her bicycle. Then he turned around and realized she was coming behind him. In his mind arose the sudden alarm of feeling followed. Seika asked him if his house was nearby, and inside Kusei's head, panic built up at the idea that she might want to know where he lived and what she might do with that information. Kusei answered that it was a walking distance away, thus indirectly admitting that it was indeed close. Seika smiled broadly and said that was nice. She also commented that she wished she lived closer to the school too. In the reflection of a convex street mirror, Kusei saw himself trapped in that situation and again thought, fearfully, that she might be following him all the way to his home. Because of this, he tried to create distance by saying he would take a different route. However, Seika replied that she had never been through those streets before. Kusei felt she had followed him for a good while, until Seika revealed that it was a joke and clarified that she was actually going the other way. Then, she said goodbye naturally, saying they would see each other tomorrow. Kusei responded nervously and remained still, releasing a heavy sigh. Still tense, he acknowledged that he had gotten scared thinking she would follow him to his house, and concluded that people like her had a completely unpredictable sense of personal boundary. Just when it seemed everything was over, Seika remembered something. She ran back and called out to Kusei, and he reacted with a jolt. Seika came very close, blushing, raising her hand, and made it clear that she had forgotten to say something. Then she thanked him for fixing her bicycle. Kusei was left bewildered, not understanding what was happening. Exhausted, Seika pointed to her hand and asked him to give her a high five as a gesture of gratitude. Kusei grasped the idea, though it was still hard for him to keep up with her pace. Finally, Kusei and Seika high-fived. Seika celebrated energetically and repeated her thanks. While Kusei wondered what all of that even was, Kusei understood that Saika had run all the way there just to thank him. Internally, he also admitted that perhaps all that time he had held an unfair misunderstanding about her, and that maybe Seika truly was a good person. Seika said goodbye once more with a smile, and Kusei also said goodbye before continuing on toward his house. While Seika watched him from behind, she repeated Kusei's name to herself, and at the same time smiled widely with genuine curiosity. The next day, outside the school, Kusei entered the classroom and noticed that it was noisier than usual, which intrigued him. Beside him, Yokokura greeted him naturally, and Kusei responded nervously. At that moment, he realized he was speaking naturally with someone as soon as he arrived at school, which filled him with excitement. Then he commented that there was quite a commotion compared to other days. Yokokura, who had been sitting and reading, looked up when she heard him. Then the rumor spread that a boy had appeared on Mizuguchi's Twitter, and Kusei reacted in shock. Yokokura checked her phone and showed him the post. Kusei tried to calm himself, thinking that they hadn't said it was him. However, the screen clearly showed a video of Kusei fixing a bicycle, alongside a caption saying that a boy from her class had repaired her bike and that he was a god. As a result, Kusei recognized that the boy was him. To make matters worse, someone suggested he might be her boyfriend, and Kusei's fear skyrocketed. Yokokura noticed how pale he had become and worriedly asked him if he was okay. Kusei tried to say that he was fine, although he felt his breakfast was about to come back up, and Yokokura replied with a direct remark that was not being fine. Nearby, some boys, indignant, criticized the desperate ones and demanded that no one mess with Mizuguchi. While wondering who the guy in the video was, Kusei felt that his ordeal had already begun. He thought that if they discovered it was him, everything would get worse. In his imagination, he even saw himself in an extreme scene, burned alive and crucified, and in his mind remained the certainty that they were going to kill him. At that moment, someone shouted a loud greeting. Just as they were talking about her, Mizuguchi Seika appeared and asked why everyone was gathered. Kusei weakly greeted her and tried not to stand out. Inside, he wished she wouldn't talk to him at all. While the murmurs continued and the same question echoed again, who was the man in the video? Seika stepped forward and, upon seeing Kusei, smiled. Then she greeted him cheerfully, using his surname, and thanked him for yesterday. Faced with that, Kusei was overwhelmed, feeling that this was the end for him. Breaking into a cold sweat, he was left speechless and understood that this was a crisis. At the same time, several boys approached in anger after hearing his surname and began threatening him. Amid that tension, Seika leaned toward Kusei flirtatiously, adopting a playful pose. Then she commented that her bicycle was working incredibly well now, like new, and Kusei could barely respond, still stunned. From behind, he felt tremendous pressure. Then Miyasaka approached to greet Seika. Immediately, he remarked that Seika seemed to be in a good mood so early in the morning. Seika answered him calmly. Meanwhile, Kusei recognized him in horror as the boy who had thrown the cloth at him the day before. Miyasaka insinuated whether the two of them were that close, and several boys cheered the question. However, Seika looked at him seriously and made it clear that it had nothing to do with him. Moreover, some others echoed the same sentiment. Miyasaka tried to excuse himself by saying that he just happened to be looking at the class Twitter and came across Seika's account. Even so, their classmates accused him of it not being an accident. Seika stared at him with disdain and called him an online stalker. Nervously, Miyasaka insisted it had been a coincidence, but the others pressured him, saying it sounded forced. Then Miyasaka showed the image from the video and asked whether the one in it was Kutsuzawa, and whether they were dating. Kusei sweated and tried to deny it, explaining that it wasn't like that and that they had just bumped into each other by chance. However, Miyasaka clicked his tongue and exploded, demanding that he speak clearly. Kusei froze. Seika, for her part, asked Miyasaka why he was yelling so much, and he apologized through gritted teeth. Then Seika repeated that whether she had a boyfriend or not had nothing to do with him. She also reproached him for always looking for a fight. Miyasaka couldn't respond. He remained silent, fist clenched, staring at the floor. Suddenly, someone arrived and placed a hand on Miyasaka's shoulder. Immediately afterward, an energetic girl entered the classroom, shoved him aside violently, and called for Seika. Behind her appeared another girl with chestnut hair and a serious expression, who greeted calmly. Consequently, Seika replied in the same unbothered manner. Then the chestnut-haired girl looked at Kusei and asked him, with obvious disinterest, what he was doing there. Kusei looked away, caught a glimpse of Miyasaka on the floor, and without really understanding what was happening, wondered who that girl was. However, the friend pointed at Kusei and recognized him as the boy from yesterday's Twitter, and Soka confirmed it. While their classmates listened attentively, the friend remarked that she had thought Seika had posted photos with a boy on her work account, and that, because of that, she had assumed Seika already had a boyfriend. Then Seika explained that she had posted from the wrong account, and added that Kusei had helped her by chance on the way home. From there, the general murmuring spread. However, her friend accepted the explanation, and with that, the gathering finally dissolved. As a result, Kusei thought with relief that he had been forgiven. At that moment, the bell rang. Seika noticed the time and said that homeroom was starting, so she left. Kusei replied nervously. However, before walking away, Seika called him by his surname again. Then she approached him and whispered, with a coquettish look, that she would thank him properly later. Kusei was left in shock. At the same time, behind him, Miyasaka overheard with an enraged, dark, and intimidating expression. Later, a clock showed that it was just before lunchtime. Kusei continued taking notes as the teacher finished the class and announced that there would be a short quiz next time. Just then, Seika appeared in a good mood and called Kusei as if he were her senpai, which surprised him. Next, Seika leaned over his desk with a smile and wanted to know what he always did at lunchtime. With enthusiasm, she suggested getting bread or going to the cafeteria, and added that she would treat him as thanks for yesterday. Inside, Kusei perceived her as a character difficult to keep up with. Even so, Kusei apologized and said he had brought a bento. Seika commented that his mom must be very diligent. However, Kusei clarified that he had made it himself. At that moment, Seika's friend entered abruptly and was shocked to learn that Kusei cooked, causing him to react with surprise. Then Kusei remembered that Seika had said Deguchi was her friend, and suddenly, everything became clear to him. Seeing Deguchi in person, he understood that this was the real Deguchi. Deguchi, meanwhile, was startled by the idea of a fake, while Seika could only laugh. Even so, Deguchi seemed disappointed and called him disgraceful. At that moment, another friend, Sonoda Ria, appeared and asked what was going on, while urging them to hurry up so they could go eat. Then Deguchi joked that it looked like Seika wanted to take advantage of Kusei's bento. Seika exploded in denial. However, Sonoda, with a serious look, accepted it emotionlessly, as if it were already obvious. Shortly after, they all put their hands together and said, "Bon appetit." Kusei looked tense, and inside, he had no idea how they had ended up eating together. While Sonoda focused on her own meal, the girls kept talking. Deguchi mentioned that Saka had bread, and Seika insisted that it wasn't because of that. Meanwhile, Kusei felt that people were staring at them too much, as if several gazes targeted him. At that moment, someone told him it was impressive and asked whether he made the bento for himself. Sonoda looked at the bento and commented that grilling fish and making things like that must take effort. Kusei replied that it wasn't that much and that, in reality, there were quick recipes. Sonoda accepted that and said she might try it someday. Then Kusei asked if Sonoda also cooked. Sonoda answered, without emotion, that her boyfriend always pushed her about wanting a homemade bento, so she always prepared too. She added that it was strange how, even today, people still said that women had to cook. Consequently, Kusei felt he had stepped on a landmine. However, Sonoda immediately clarified that she wasn't angry and that she was just showing off. Kusei remained silent. Seika, in a low voice, commented that although Sonoda complained, she always looked happy. Sonoda protested because they were talking about her. Seika, in turn, told her to go show off somewhere else. Deguchi laughed and said Seika would be the one bragging the most once she got a boyfriend. Sonoda, dry as ever, confirmed it. Then Seika placed her hands on the desk and admitted that she would, because when she had a boyfriend, it would be with her soulmate and it would be a real love. That line, moreover, was accompanied by a dreamy sparkle in her expression. During lunch, Kusei was surprised to realize that with someone like Seika, anyone would assume she had had 1 or 2 boyfriends. However, he immediately corrected that thought and understood that the only thing he had truly learned was not to judge by appearances. In that context, Deguchi took interest in him and wanted to know if he had a girlfriend. At the question, Kusei smiled awkwardly and admitted that he hadn't had one either, explaining that he spent a lot of time alone, while Seika listened quietly. As a result, Seika reacted with surprise at that way of living and made it clear that, to her, it sounded boring. Even so, Kusei answered that it wasn't boring, because he kept himself busy with hobbies. Seika interpreted that as his being good with his hands and was impressed, until suddenly she burst out with enthusiasm, praising him as if he were a companion with noble ideals. Immediately, Kusei tried to deny it, and inside, he understood that the real problem was his lack of social skills. Shortly after, the conversation became lighter and more trivial. Seika commented that Kusei could talk quite normally. Then, Kusei responded jokingly, wondering aloud whether he should stutter or maybe even dance more. And the idea of dancing became tied to TikTok. Seika laughed, and in that way, the exchange continued without becoming serious. After classes, outside the school, Seika stretched, making it clear that it was time to go home. She then noticed something. Kusei, wasting no time, slipped away quickly. Seika watched him and was surprised at how fast he packed up, as if he truly intended to sprint away at full speed. Meanwhile, as she looked at him, she smiled and thought he was funny. However, that same thought stopped her, and she realized she should wait. Seika put her things in her bag and noticed that she was still looking toward Kutsuzawa Kusei. That persistence, in turn, unsettled her. She also recognized that she had taken notice of him even before the bicycle incident. In that memory, Seika saw him as someone who didn't get swept up in everyone else's vibe. Someone who made and fixed things, as if he had his own world. Then she recalled that during break, he had been drawing blueprints, and she admitted that she had once peeked secretly. The image focused on Kusei's hand tracing lines, so precise they looked machine-made. Seika blushed as she accepted that, honestly, she found it incredible. Suddenly, someone opened the door. At that moment, Miyasaka appeared with a smile and called out to her. Seika was surprised, recognized him, and asked what he wanted. Miyasaka positioned himself behind her and suggested going to a takoyaki place near the station. Seika rejected him without hesitation. Even so, Miyasaka insisted, offering to treat her. Seika responded irritably, saying she had a long day ahead and didn't want snacks, and the story emphasized how persistent he was. Far from backing off, Miyasaka kept smiling confidently and continued insisting. At the same time, Seika thought of his name and clearly recognized that she couldn't stand him. In her mind remained the idea that he only tried to get close because she was a model or something similar. In fact, as she walked away, she described that impression as careless, obsessed with appearances, and empty inside. Even as Seika distanced herself, Miyasaka called out to her again. At that moment, Seika looked toward the direction Kusei had gone and realized something about herself, as if she saw her own reflection in that criticism. Miyasaka, confused, questioned her remark, but Seika cut the moment short, saying it was nothing, and that she would see him later. Then Seika heard someone calling her from behind. She looked forward with a serious expression, and without stopping for that voice, decided to take her bicycle and leave. While she was walking, Seika focused on a constant thought. She felt jealous of people who have something they love and can face it head-on. At the same time, she felt she didn't have anything like that, and not even her modeling job made her feel complete. Then, when she thought about Kusei, Seika associated that passion with the act of doing things, as if it came naturally to him. That idea, however, stopped her. Seika braked her bicycle and was surprised to realize where she was. She had arrived in front of a workshop, and she understood that by thinking about him, she had somehow ended up finding that place. Right away, she recognized it as the place belonging to Kutsuzawa Kusei. When she looked at the sign with his surname, she assumed that since it was unusual, it had to refer to him. She also noticed, surprised, that it wasn't far from where they had separated the day before. From there, Seika fell into panic. She didn't understand why she had come all the way there and accused herself of acting like a stalker. she remained standing at the entrance, reading the sign that offered custom-made furniture, unable to justify her presence. Even so, she looked inside the workshop. Someone was working with a woodworking machine. Kusei appeared, sweating as he worked, and it was clear how carefully he carved the wood. Saka watched him in surprise and with restrained emotion. Kusei adjusted the cloth on his head and went back to working with focus. Nearby, a board displayed floral designs made in resin, making it clear that this was handcrafted work. Kusei held the wood and the tool firmly. In a wider panel, the two of them remained at opposite ends, Kusei working seriously and Seika watching him in silence. In Seika's mind, a simple conclusion took hold. He was truly incredible. Then, Seika took out her phone. Without knowing why, she wanted to capture that scene and take it home with her. From the entrance, she took a photo. The click sounded clearly. Kusei turned around, surprised, and his expression showed that he had no idea what was happening. Seika, flushed and nervous, was left speechless. In her mind, the realization of what she had just done hit her hard. Kusei tried to ask her, awkwardly, wanting to understand why she was there at that moment. Seika tried to explain, but couldn't find any orderly way to do so. Feeling cornered, she got on her bicycle and hurried away, apologizing for the inconvenience. However, Kusei asked her to wait. In that attempt to flee, the bicycle chain slipped off, stopping her movement. Seika reacted to the sound, and at that moment, remembered what Kusei had warned her. The chain looked old, and it would be better to replace it. Kusei arrived, out of breath, and again asked her to wait. Seika panicked, convinced that everything was over for her, while Kusei, exhausted, insisted that she please stop. Inside the workshop, the two of them finally stood together. Kusei held out a bottle and offered it to her. Seika took it and thanked him. Then, seriously, Kusei wanted to know how it was even possible that she knew where he lived. Seika fell into internal panic, because she couldn't say that she had followed him without realizing it, and her mind exploded with the pressure to come up with something. So she gave a long explanation. She said she had recently moved, that she didn't know the area, that she happened to pass by, that she wanted to explore, that she saw the workshop sign with the surname Kutsuzawa and, since it was unusual, thought it might be related to him. Therefore, she went in. Kusei replied that it was a very long explanation. Even so, he understood the essential part, that she had basically found his place. Seika confirmed it strongly, and deep inside, she repeated to herself that technically, she wasn't lying. Kusei let that go and moved on to the question that mattered. He wanted to know why she was taking photos. Seika froze. Deep down, she understood it was logical for him to ask that. She gathered her courage and confessed that she thought he looked incredible. Seika explained that he was so absorbed in what he was doing that he didn't even notice someone was there. And to her, that looked truly amazing. That confession shook Kusei from head to toe. Seika watched him, not understanding his reaction. Kusei, nervous, felt that her explanation sounded somewhat uncomfortable. Then, Kusei burst into shock upon realizing that Saka had been taking pictures of him. Seika panicked, as if she didn't understand why he would reach that conclusion. However, Kusei clarified that he had thought she was filming what he was doing, not taking photos of him. Hearing that, Seika became completely embarrassed. She froze and began to shake, which made Kusei worry about her condition. Even so, Seika tried to justify herself and explained that when she saw a really good shot, she captured it without thinking. In her mind, she assumed that this explanation was her escape route. For his part, Kusei looked at the phone and interpreted it as something typical of someone used to social media. Meanwhile, Seika, sitting down and red-faced, felt that everything was unbearably embarrassing. On the phone screen, the picture of Kusei working appeared. Kusei was surprised to see that, indeed, there was a full shot of him. Carefully, he asked whether she intended to post it. Seika let out a forced laugh and said it was fine, that she wouldn't upload it. Though inwardly, she became scared upon realizing that keeping it only for herself could also sound bad. Then, Kusei lowered his gaze and admitted that honestly, he would prefer if she deleted it. Seika couldn't help feeling sad at the idea. Even so, in her mind she looked at the photo again and described it as beautiful, focusing on the radiance of someone doing what they truly love with complete concentration. Moved by that emotion, Seika asked to keep the photo, as long as she didn't use it improperly. Kusei reacted in surprise. Embarrassed, Seika insisted that it had turned out really pretty and that it would be a waste to delete it. Kusei, remembering what had happened that morning, made it clear that he didn't want it to happen again. Upon hearing that something had happened, Seika was startled. However, Kusei softened his words and explained that rather, it had been as if something had almost happened. Hearing that, Seika sank into herself, realizing she didn't even know how many problems she had already caused. Because of this, Seika bowed to apologize. She said she had probably been inconsiderate and reaffirmed that she truly wouldn't put it online. Kusei only sighed. Then, looking at her sincerely, he accepted that if she wouldn't post it on social media, then she could keep it. Immediately, Seika lit up with excitement. After that, Kusei added that if she wanted, she could crop his face and play around with it. However, Seika firmly refused. Finally, Kusei concluded that as long as she didn't use it maliciously, he would accept it. As a result, Seika was delighted. Afterward, Seika changed the subject and wanted to know what Kusei had been working on. He explained that he was prototyping many things as a hobby, but that they weren't going very well and weren't anything he could show. Even so, Seika insisted that he show her, though Kusei refused with an apology. Seika accepted, but inside she held on to the idea that he didn't show anything unfinished. She interpreted that as a professional mindset, and that impression made her blush intensely. For his part, Kusei worried that he had disappointed her and imagined that she already thought he was boring. Then, he touched a box and decided to show her something. 3 carved figures appeared on the table. A rabbit, a small bear, and an elephant, all as wooden sculptures. Seika reacted in surprise as she recognized the carving. Emotion rose in her immediately, and she called it cute, adding that it was unbelievable. She was also impressed to confirm that Kusei had truly made them with his own hands and not with a machine. Then, sitting at the table, Seika looked at Kusei with a confused expression for a moment, as if she needed to reorganize what she was seeing. At the same time, Kusei also became confused by that brief pause. Immediately afterward, with her eyes shining, Seika declared that it was a definitive national treasure. Kusei responded shyly that she was exaggerating. Even so, he smiled in satisfaction when he realized that her reaction was much better than he had expected. And he felt genuinely happy while Seika kept admiring the figures. Then, Kusei placed something else on the table and called out to Seika. She turned quickly, surprised. Before her eyes appeared a large carved figure of Oda Nobunaga. Kusei pointed out that he also had an Oda Nobunaga, and Seika burst into laughter, equally surprised. The figure looked huge and detailed. Seika found the choice random and didn't understand why him specifically. She also pointed out how enormous it was. Kusei, however, was simply satisfied that she had laughed. Laughing, Seika typed something on her phone and said that the statue was killing her with how funny it was. In his mind, Kusei felt pleased by those laughs. However, a hand was shown typing quickly, and Kusei watched in surprise as he noticed the movement. He immediately realized she was about to send something, and he understood what that meant. Seeing his reaction, Seika said that habit had gotten the best of her. Then, a screen appeared showing that it had already been posted. Kusei began to sweat, horrified, and inwardly begged her to reflect a little on herself. Even so, Seika held the phone and tried to calm him down. She said that this time, she hadn't posted it on her work account like the day before. She also smiled nervously so that he could see. On the screen, the post appeared, a photo of the Nobunaga statue. Seika laughed and pointed out that his face wasn't visible at all, that it was just Nobunaga. The caption on the phone said that the wooden Nobunaga statue was killing her with laughter. Even so, Kusei remained terrified and sweating with embarrassment. Then, Seika became serious and added that there was nothing in the picture that showed where he lived. Kusei, still embarrassed, accepted that, but asked that next time she please check with him first. Finally, Seika bowed apologetically, said she was sorry, and promised it wouldn't happen again. Inside the workshop, Seika leaned in far too close to Kusei while examining a box, causing him to blush. and inwardly he could only note that she was far too close and that her sense of personal space was hard to understand. Seika, on the other hand, spoke naturally and asked him whether he sold those pieces and if she could buy one, unaware of how intimidating it was to be standing so close. In response, Kusei said, embarrassed, that he couldn't sell any of those figures because they were already reserved. Seika repeated the idea while looking toward the table, trying to understand. Then, the memory appeared of a little girl hugging one of the figures with joy. And from that, Kusei explained that he gave them to the children of a foster home, something he did every year for a neighborhood event. Seika accepted the reason and recognized that there was nothing she could say against that. Even so, she sighed as she looked at one of the figures sadly and admitted that it was a shame because she really wanted it. Kusei apologized. However, he added that he had a spare of the Nobunaga one and dropped the heavy figure onto the table. Then he took a breath and, as an alternative, offered to make something else for her. Seika was genuinely surprised, as if she had not expected that offer. Meanwhile, Kusei said it cheerfully, explaining that after all, it was his hobby. He also mentioned that this was wood carving, though he could also make other things like plush toys or little figurines. Seika repeated the word figurines quietly, as if tasting it, and then asked whether he had been making things like that for a long time. Kusei answered modestly, saying yes, though his older works were low in quality. Then, with genuine interest, he realized that she might want to make them too, and began explaining that for beginners, you could start with something simple, an aluminum wire and a bit of oven-baked clay. However, Seika grew nervous and hurried to say that it was fine, that it was enough for her just to look at them, making it clear that she understood he had been about to offer to teach her. Kusei's spirits dropped a little at that response, and he accepted it with a simple acknowledgement. To soften the moment, Seika smiled nervously and commented that, personally, she preferred those wooden carvings because they had a real warmth to them. Right after that, she returned to the practical matter and wanted to know how much it would cost. Kusei was startled by the idea of money, since he understood he couldn't accept payment from a classmate. Even so, he also realized she wasn't asking for it for free, and that, in reality, she was respecting the craft. That idea surprised him because he realized Seika truly appreciated his work. In fact, Seika looked at the figures and explained that all the skill developed over time was poured into those pieces, and that she couldn't accept something so incredible without paying for it. Kusei touched his head while he thought about it, and in the end searched for a solution that wouldn't reject her intention. That's why he proposed that next time something came up, she could help him with something. Seika lit up instantly, accepted with enthusiasm, and said he could count on her, with a radiant smile. In that moment, Seika paused, as if remembering something important, and asked for a moment. Then she admitted that she still hadn't properly thanked him for fixing her bicycle. Kusei was surprised, because he thought that eating together had already been her way of thanking him. Seika reacted to that idea, and for a second, her imagination went into exaggerated mode, as if she pictured herself letting him eat with her in a haughty, self-important way. However, she returned to reality, grew serious, and understood that if she acted like that, she would look like a complete fool. And similarly, Kusei also realized that internally, Seika remained thinking about what she should do. Finally, she reached the conclusion that Kusei would probably refuse money, and that what mattered was showing how grateful she was. Because of that, she looked genuinely troubled about how to repay him. Outside the workshop, Seika declared that she had already made a decision. Later, in her apartment, she lay face down on her bed, embarrassed, kicking her legs until they hit the mattress and letting out a scream. Then she tried to justify herself, still embarrassed, and admitted that she had invited him in the heat of the moment. In that memory appeared what she herself had said earlier. She suggested going to the nearby shopping mall, mentioned that there would be places to eat, and finished by saying that she would treat him. That proposal made her startle. Seika blushed when she realized it was the first time she would go out alone with a boy, and since that idea overwhelmed her, she ended up screaming in desperation. Then someone asked her to stop yelling so loudly. At that moment, Seika's phone vibrated. It was a message from her friend Deguchi, who was talking about the post on Twitter. There, Seika told her that the next day they were going out to eat. Deguchi then asked if it was with Kutsuzawa Kusei, and Seika answered yes, as a thank you for him fixing her bicycle. Hearing that, Deguchi reacted immediately, joyfully calling it a date, even adding a sticker. In response, Seika rolled around on the bed, screaming for her to shut up. However, Deguchi insisted, repeating the same idea again and again, while Seika replied each time more desperately, demanding that she stop. Then Deguchi asked what all of that really meant. Seika stared at her phone in silence, not knowing what to answer. In the end, she wrote that it wasn't anything important, that it was just a thank you and nothing more. Even so, she seemed restless and confused. Deguchi accepted it, though with doubts, and recommended that she get some sleep for the next day. Even so, Seika remained lying face down, unable to sleep. In her mind, the question appeared of what Kutsuzawa might think, and she answered herself that he probably wasn't thinking much about it at all. Afterward, she was shown lying down while looking at her phone, with a soft and dreamy expression, as if repeating that same idea in her mind to convince herself. The next day, Kusei stood in front of a modern building, holding his phone. When he checked the time, he saw it was already 10:52 and understood this was the right place. He had arrived a bit early, since the meeting was at 11. Then he began walking back and forth, nervous and restless, his steps forming a repetitive rhythm. Inside, he understood that going as a thank you for the bicycle was one thing. However, he was still worried that he would have nothing to talk about and wouldn't know how to keep a conversation going. It also weighed on him that he didn't have her contact information, and at the same time, he felt uneasy wondering if she would actually show up. At that moment, from a distance, a voice called out to him by his surname. Hearing it, Kusei turned around in surprise. Seika approached wearing a casual, modern outfit, and she greeted him cheerfully with her hand raised. Still surprised, Kusei replied nervously and apologized for making her wait. Even so, inside he was shocked to see her like that, wearing normal clothes and outside the classroom context. Seika gave him a bright smile and clarified that she had just arrived too. Then she stepped closer and, without saying anything for a moment, adopted a thoughtful pose. Kusei noticed the shift and wanted to know what was happening. However, Seika resumed the conversation and said she had already thought about this yesterday. Then, laughing as she touched her chin, she commented on how strange it was to see a classmate wearing regular clothes and how unusual that feeling was. Kusei responded timidly, accepting her comment. As they walked, Kusei made a remark about Seika's casual clothes, saying that she looked very feminine. Even though Seika was guiding the way, she paused at the meaning of those words and wanted to understand what they were supposed to imply. Confusion rose within her, and she ended up questioning what kind of compliment that was supposed to be. Nervous, Kusei tried to explain himself. He said he just meant that gals were very feminine. Seika looked at him with a kind smile. However, she then laughed and pointed out that there were things he was supposed to say, like, "You look cute," or "That looks really good on you." So Kusei took a deep breath and spoke sincerely. He told her that Seika was very pretty, and that because of that, he believed anything she wore would look good on her. He said it calmly, without realizing the strength of the compliment. Seika, on the other hand, fell completely into shock. She blushed up to her ears, and even her glasses lifted a little. Then she lowered her head, so embarrassed she could barely speak. Yet she still managed to thank him in a small voice. Kusei was left confused by her reaction. To change the subject, Seika mentioned that they had never exchanged numbers. Kusei replied that he had been thinking the same. Then Seika, smiling, commented that if he hadn't shown up, she would have gone to his house. Kusei was surprised, since he had been the one worrying she might not come. After that, they both extended their phones, making it clear they were exchanging contact information. Seika looked at her screen with a sweet smile and said it was done, and that now Kusei would be fine even if he got lost. However, Kusei answered firmly that he wouldn't get lost. Seika let out a small laugh, and the moment ended with that lightness. Finally, with a confident smile, she suggested going to a game center before eating. Kusei, uncomfortable, clarified that he actually didn't like casino games or anything like that. At that, Seika reacted dramatically, offended that he had understood it that way, and made it clear she had never set foot in a place like that. Then she laughed, and without overthinking it, made it clear she just wanted Kusei to stay with her for a while. In the end, Kusei agreed, intimidated but resigned. From there, the scenes continued without needing many words. The game center machines appeared, a sign indicating a student-only area, and immediately, Seika took Kusei by the arm to lead him. After that, the two of them posed for photos in a Purikura booth. While Seika looked excited, Kusei remained surprised by the situation. Then she checked the printed photos and reacted with satisfaction, and Kusei couldn't help noticing how happy she looked. Later, they were at a restaurant. Kusei thanked her for the meal, and at the same time apologized for letting Seika pay. However, Seika calmly replied that he shouldn't worry, because she had been the one to say it was a thank you. She even pointed out that he could have chosen a more expensive place. Also, as she looked at the photos, Seika added that on top of that, she'd managed to see something interesting. Hearing that, Kusei, surprised, commented that the editing in those photo booths was insane. When they finished eating, Seika wanted to keep checking out other places. Kusei assumed she might be planning to buy something. However, Seika told him no, that she simply had nothing else to do that day. So even though it still felt strange to him, Kusei accepted it. Then they arrived at a clothing store. Kusei walked in nervously, questioning whether it was okay for a guy to wander around the women's clothing section. At that moment, from afar, Seika called out to him by his surname, and Kusei turned around in surprise. Seika was holding up a garment excitedly and wanted to know if it looked super cute. Kusei answered uncertainly, as if he didn't know what to say. Inside, he also noted that the outfit seemed too cold around the stomach area, so it didn't seem all that appropriate to him. Even so, Kusei watched her pick out clothing combinations and ended up admitting that he didn't know anything about fashion. He paid attention to how she paired it with a jacket, and wondered if Seika could instantly imagine what items would look good together. Meanwhile, Seika checked the prices and complained that they were absurdly expensive. Kusei interpreted that as a kind of common sense reflex typical of someone professional, and his thoughts went back to her being a model. In response, Seika laughed at his comment and joked by asking if he was interested in being a model too, and if he wanted to apply. Kusei, nervous, replied that it wasn't a very funny joke. Then, with a smile, he said he had thought she must really like clothes. Seika understood and replied with gentle sincerity. She said she did like them, but she wasn't sure if it was her number one passion. Then Seika struck a confident pose, and with a bright expression, stated very naturally that she was pretty sure she got modeling jobs because she was beautiful. Kusei was surprised she said it so fearlessly. However, Seika laughed and admitted that maybe it wasn't the best way to phrase it, though she added that the truth was she received a lot of compliments. Then she kept walking while he followed her. Kusei, thoughtful, accepted that he could believe that, since she really was very beautiful. He also noticed that several men in the store were staring at her openly, and inwardly understood that people had been watching Seika the entire time. To reinforce that idea, a memory appeared of boys in their class shouting excitedly whenever she showed up, as proof of her popularity. After that, a can fell from a vending machine with a sharp clunk, and Kusei understood that it was typical of Seika not to be falsely modest. Right away, Kusei returned with drinks and placed them on a table. Calmly, he went back to what she had said and turned it into a clear question. He understood that even though she enjoyed the compliments, she still didn't consider modeling her number one passion. Seika sat down and thanked him. As she opened the can, she tried to explain that she wasn't sure how to put it into words. Then, to shift the focus, Seika steered the conversation toward Kusei and wanted to know if he had been good at making things from the very beginning. Kusei was surprised and denied it. In fact, he confessed that at the start he had been terrible and had even cut his hands. Seika laughed and replied that for her, it had been pretty easy from the beginning. That confused Kusei. Even so, Seika continued, scratching her head, and explained that makeup and fashion had come naturally to her from the start, simply by copying what she saw. She added that later she had studied theory and similar things, so Kusei eventually understood that she was the type with natural talent. Then a stylized memory appeared of Seika, happily wearing a mascot-style costume, as if she had a very clear idea that she had never failed in a way that forced her to get back up and try again. In that same memory, the phrase "easy victory" accompanied the scene, reinforcing that feeling. Hearing her, Kusei wanted to understand whether Seika was saying that her starting point had been different from everyone else's. The memory continued with both of them wearing mascot suits, and Seika contrasted that ease with the fact that Kusei could be knocked down and still try again. As a result, she concluded that if having the passion to keep going because you want to improve no matter what defined it, then that was not her. The image showed her asleep inside the costume while Kusei kept running, trying to reach his goals. Faced with that confession, Kusei wanted to know what would have happened if she had failed. Seika, embarrassed, admitted that she probably wouldn't have kept trying. In fact, she confessed that she would have pretended it didn't matter and even used that as an excuse to give up. In the end, she finished by saying that she was that foolish. However, Kusei, holding his drink, murmured that he didn't think there was anything wrong with that. That sentence surprised Seika. Then Kusei opened his drink with a clear sound and added that there were many things he avoided as well. He also acknowledged that, in reality, he had simply been lucky. He had found something he was passionate about from the beginning, and that was all. With a gentle smile, Kusei handed a can to Seika and told her that she could still find that thing for herself, and that there was no need to rush. Seika looked at him, surprised and visibly moved. Then she smiled, blushing, took the drink, and thanked him, clearly showing that his words had touched her more than she expected. As the evening settled in, Kusei said goodbye and thanked her for the day. However, Seika shook her head and thanked him, not only for the time but also for the conversation about life and for everything she was taking away from it. Kusei smiled and downplayed it, saying he had had a lot of fun. Seika laughed in relief and accepted that if that was the case, then it was good. When they had already taken some distance, Kusei remembered the other promise, the one about carving something, and wanted to know what he should make for Seika. At that moment, Seika lifted a finger, as if she had been waiting for exactly that, and said she had a request. Then she prepared to explain it, a bit embarrassed, and mentioned that she would like a figure from a fairly old anime. For her, that was what she wanted, and she said it with a nostalgic sparkle. Kusei reacted in surprise and said he knew it, remembering that anime. Then he continued, recalling that a long time ago, he had made one. However, he clarified that it had been a figure and not a wood carving. Seika couldn't help blushing hearing that, as if she immediately understood the difference. Embarrassed, she wanted to know what had happened to the one he had made. In Kusei's memory, the answer was vague but clear. He believed he had given it to a child who was in the hospital. Upon hearing that, Seika reacted with surprise and emotion, as if that response carried special meaning. Blushing and excited, she began calling him by a nickname, Ku-chan. However, the phrase was cut short when Kusei began speaking, saying that it didn't matter and that he didn't really remember. Then Kusei explained calmly that back then he really liked making figures. He had made a bunch of them, and in the end had ended up giving them away to many different children. In response to that, Seika was left with a tense expression. Halfway between suspicious, upset, and hurt, she said nothing. Even so, her gaze showed that she had just understood something, and that she didn't like it. Seika turned slightly away, as if processing what had just hit her, while Kusei's voice continued explaining that the first child he gave one to was a girl named Meguru. He also said that the girl had been incredibly happy, and that her reaction had left such a strong impression on him that, because of that, he didn't remember the other children as clearly. Hearing those words, Seika's body tensed even more. Kusei smiled awkwardly and innocently said that it had been almost 10 years ago, so it was normal not to remember them all. Then, touching the back of his neck, he went back to the idea of making that Kiraru, offering to make it in good faith. At that moment, Seika's arm trembled with frustration. She muttered that she didn't want it. Kusei froze, not understanding, and could only react with surprise. However, Seika finally snapped. with her face red and her eyes overflowing with pent-up emotion. She shouted that she had already said she didn't want it. Then she called him Ku-chan again and insulted him harshly, as if releasing something she had been holding inside. Immediately after, Seika ran off with a dark expression, hiding her face. She looked embarrassed, frustrated, and wounded. Meanwhile, Kusei remained standing in the middle of the plaza, completely confused, while people walked by as if nothing had happened. Kusei touched his head, overwhelmed, unable to understand what had just happened. Still in shock, he could only repeat his disbelief. Suddenly, understanding struck him and he fell into total panic. He began denying it again and again, and the question turned into desperation. Unable to find a clear reason for what had occurred,